welcome to another fabulous episode of Thyroid Refresh TV, a podcast dedicated to helping you live a thyroid healthy lifestyle. We're so glad to be back with you again. I'm Dana Bowman.
And I'm Ginny Mahar, and we are the dynamic duo behind Thyroid Refresh and Thyroid 30. And we're thrilled to be here today to talk with Reed Davis about thyroid-specific nutrition. How in the world do we figure out what to eat as thyroid patients? So we'll be discussing dietary and other root causes of thyroid imbalances, including the importance of food sensitivity testing to uncover hidden healing opportunities. So welcome, Reed. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope we could do some good.
Yeah, before we jump into the good, we want to tell you guys a little bit about Reed. He is a holistic health practitioner and certified nutritional therapist. He's an expert in functional lab testing and holistic lifestyle medicine and founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, FDN. Reed served as the health director and case manager at a wellness center in Southern California for over 10 years and now teaches the FDN course with over 2,500 trainees or candidates in 50 countries. Impressive. Today, Reed is known as one of the most successful and experienced clinicians in the world, having provided functional lab assessments to over 10,000 clients. He's also a clinical advisor for BioHealth Laboratories and lives in the U.S. teaching the FDN Certification Course and helping his graduates build robust private practices.
And just to continue with this amazingly impressive background, as an environmental paralegal throughout the 90s, Reed was saving the planet, including the birds, bees, air, water, and trees. And in 1999, he turned his attention to the question, what is the environment doing to people, including me? And that began a 20-year career dedicated to helping people find out what's really going wrong and how can we fix it naturally. So after earning a certificate in nutritional therapy, Reed noticed that most patients had already seen multiple doctors and therapists and still had so many of their original complaints. So he decided that he would be the last practitioner anyone needed to see and became an expert in functional lab assessments. So FDN is the result of more research and experience than most practitioners get in a lifetime. So this is going to be a great conversation, guys. Now, before we kind of drill down into the power of nutrition, Reed, I wanted to take a look at your story from 30,000 feet. And I love that a huge part of your journey was that fundamental question, right? What is the environment doing to people, including me? Because, you know, the greater conversation that we're a part of today is about so much more than just a thyroid diagnosis or just eliminating gluten, right? Every single one of us is part of an ecosystem and, you know, an ecosystem in peril, some might say. So how would you answer that question today? What is the environment doing to people, including me?
Well, great question and thanks. And yeah, I had a lot of fun saving the planet. And then I thought, man, forget the birds and bees. What about me and everyone else? So I went to work in this clinic, and I was the health director, manager, and everyone had to talk to me before they went to see a doctor or clinician or whatever. And I started taking these nutrition courses and things like that. And I got to work on patients in between my classes. It was a remarkable opportunity that hardly anyone gets. And everybody was saying this, that they'd already been to 5 or 8 practitioners. And it really bothered me. I mean, from a strictly consumer advocacy point of view, I figured they're getting ripped off. If you've seen 5 or 8 or 10 practitioners and you're not better yet, there's a problem here. But no, that was 20 years ago, and I was very naive. And I thought I was going to be the last person everyone needed to see, and that became my goal. And it is partly the environment, if you include all the elements of it. I mean, that's what affects every cell, tissue, organ, and system in your body. You know, most people are given a lot of talk these days about genes, and it's all in your genetics. You know, it's not. genetics account for, according to Dr. Russell Jaffe, who's one of my heroes, about 8%. The rest is epigenetics. So that means the expression of your cellular intelligence, if you will. And that has to do with the environment. And not just the air you breathe and the water you drink and what's in your food, but it's everything from how you think to the amount of exercise you do to how well you sleep to all the various stressors. And of course, we have supplementation and things like that. So there's a lot of, just let's call it stress, and it's not all good stress. A lot of it's really bad stress. And so that's what I've studied for 20 years and how that affects the body, including the thyroid. But let's face it, that's just one problem that people end up with. You could relate almost any problem people have back to the epigenetic program that they're living in, or the environment, if you will, for a bigger term. And so that's where I'm coming from. If that's true, that every cell, tissue, organ, and system can be negatively affected by the environment or epigenetic influences, these are information systems, well, then guess what? There's got to be a counteraction to that, a counter program, if you will. Well, what would be a great environment? What would epigenetically have a beneficial or good influence on every cell, tissue, organ, and system in the body? And for me, that was incredibly important. Not to run my mouth on and on, but see, I didn't come to this as a physician with medical training, understanding disease and treating disease. I came to it from an environmentalist, research and development, consumer advocacy point of view, where I just want to know what works, what's going to help every person on the planet be healthier and happier. And so that's the 30,000-foot view.
I love that. I've heard the adage that, genetics loads the gun, but it's the environment and lifestyle factors that pull the trigger. And that seems like it applies here in a big way. Yeah.
Well, it does. Yeah, there's been some very large studies on genetics and breaking down the human, genes, the human, information system, and it's limited because there's so many other information systems having an equal or greater effect, and we call that epigenetics. So yeah, genes load the gun, if you will, and epigenetics or lifestyle pulls the trigger or not. And so if you have the genes for colon cancer, well, there's ways to work the edges of that so that you don't get colon cancer. You don't want those genes expressing in that way. You want to turn those genes off. And there's only one way to do it.
Yeah, I think there's a big fear factor with genetic testing. People are like, I don't want to know what I'm going to die of. It's like, well, you're not necessarily going to die of that. It just, this is just things you might be predisposed to. So why not get out ahead of that and try to prevent those things from taking place,
I mean, it's just like a piece of the pie, right? It's just like a little teeny tiny piece of the pie. Here is what your genetics are and what you could be predisposed to. Here is where you live and your environment and pesticides and drink and eat. And here's where you came from and where you grew up and what your mother and what her mother went through. I mean, there's all these little pieces to the puzzle that make you you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, my father died of colon cancer, and his father died of colon cancer. So I had my genes tested and found out, yeah, you've got the gene. I mean, no surprise. And then there are lifestyle factors that would turn those genes on so that you're more likely to get colon cancer, or turn them off so that you're less likely. The biggest one being processed meat. Like I eat no cold cuts. I mean, I used to love salami and, ham and all these things you get out of a package, pepperoni on my pizza. All that's full of nitrites and nitrates. And I strictly avoid those. I mean, I'm doing what I can to not express those genes in that way. So in other words, genes are an information system, but we figured that when we figured out the human genome, we'd know everything that you should do. And it just didn't turn out that way because of all the other information systems that are also in the mix or in the works. So those information systems are what we want to look at. And it is life. We're calling it lifestyle medicine now.
Mm.
And so it's a beautiful thing.
And how does food fit into that equation? How big of a factor is it, would you say? Is it the biggest? Is it just one of the biggest?
Well, it's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, and the more importantly, it's the one thing we can control. So if you live in LA, you're not really able to control the air you breathe very well. But you can certainly control what you eat. And matter of fact, I live down in San Diego, and we're trying not to let it become LA Junior. We call it smell-a, the smell-aification of San Diego. We don't want that down here. So, and I live way outside town in the mountains on a lake, and so I'm doing my part, I think. But diet's huge. Diet is one thing you control, and you have to eat. You're made of food. You're made of food. So whatever's in that food goes into you. It starts to make up who and what you are in a sense. So you're made of food, and it would behoove you to know what the best diet for you is. And that's a big question. One thing I'll guarantee you, there's no one diet that's right for everybody. And that's because we're all such unique individuals. But there are groups, and you can kind of categorize yourself. And there's even a test. I have been following the metabolic typing diet for a long, long time. Bill Wolcott's a friend of mine now. He wrote the metabolic typing diet. It's a great book for anyone interested in individualizing your diet. And it generally would back up the idea of the ancestral diet. Yeah, eat like your ancestors did 500 generations ago, if you can figure out what that was. And well, it's pretty hard to figure out with the way the world is now. So, roughly 12,000 years ago, people started to migrate and farm and, travel around in boats and things like that. So we interbred. There's hardly anyone that would be really pure and direct descendants of their 500 generation ago ancestors. So that diet, and some of those foods may not be very reliable today. There's a real shortage of mammoth meat from what I heard,
Right.
And so these kinds of things. But diets developed geographically and climate wise to be in the soils and the animals that ate the plants that grew in those soils, and then we ate the animals and all these other sorts of things. So it's real regionalized, if you will. And that's the ancestral diet you should eat. I completely agree with ancestral dieting, but which one? Mm-hmm. And then how would you know that you're actually eating it right? Well, how would it make you feel? And I could help your audience right now with 3 quick tips on diet and how you know if it's the right one, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay. So there's the idea of macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So everything can kind of be categorized: protein, fat, and carb. And there is a ratio that's going to work for you. And it's going to be fueling your cells in the right way. Cells don't have to be taught what their job is. They just need to be fueled correctly and remove interference in such that it could be. So if you're going to fuel yourself up with protein, fats, and carbs, there's a ratio. It's going to be the fuel mixture for you. And you've heard of protein types and carb types, and that's absolutely true. It has to do with the rate at which your cells burn fuel for energy. So there are very fast oxidizers. Those are, when you oxidize, you're burning fuel. They need a lot of slow burning fuel like protein and fat. So would an Eskimo be a fast oxidizer or a slow oxidizer? Well, they're very fast oxidizers. So they can eat almost pure fat and protein because it metabolizes or burns slowly, and it fuels them. Their cells know what to do. after that. If you give that same person, matter of fact, my cousin was a priest up in Canada, had 2 Cree Indian villages as his parishes, and they were all sick. They all had diabetes because they were eating very fast burning fuel. They're eating carbohydrates. That's like putting a piece of paper on a bonfire. It's poof, it's gone. You have no energy. It's not producing any energy. You need to put some big fat logs on that fast oxidizer, and that's what the protein and fats would represent. So now you can, figure out that I'm a protein type and kind of dial it in. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. So how do you know? Well, let's pretend tomorrow morning for breakfast you eat 75% protein and fat, which most protein has fat in it, like meat. If you're eating meat, if you're a meat eater, you're gonna have fat. It's kind of all mixed together. So your protein and fat versus carbohydrates. Let's say you start with 50-50, and it's the way it looks on a plate. Don't do grams, don't do anything else. Just you got half your plate full of meat, basically, or protein with some fat in it, and the other half is nice, rich, high quality, low glycemic index type carbohydrates, like good vegetables and maybe a little fruit for some people. So, well, if that burns correctly, if that's the right fuel mixture for you, you should feel 3 things. One is a sense of satiation. You should be satisfied. There's hormones at work to know if you're satisfied, if that was a good fuel mixture for you, and you would feel that you're not missing anything, that you're not craving anything. Nothing was missing from the meal. You're satiated. So satiation becomes a big critical factor. If you ate, again, a plate that was half meat and fat, or protein and fat, and half carbohydrates, it was perfect for you. Then 2 hours later, you'd be completely satisfied, satiated. You'd also have something else. It's called energy. You wouldn't feel nervous energy or tired energy. You'd feel just solid, like true energy. Like you have the energy to get through to the next meal, to do some work, have some fun, whatever it might be. Go hunting, fishing, killing, or even playing, whatever it is. You're doing some work. So you would be satiated, and you would be have energy, if you produce some energy. And believe it or not, the third thing, and this is straight out of metabolic typing, is a sense of well-being. You actually should be, because now you're talking about the effects of not only the right ratio of protein, fat, and carbs, but which ones. You've got all the vitamins and the minerals and the essential fatty acids and amino acids and antioxidants and things, so that you actually have a good, strong sense of well-being. So if you get the right ratio of protein, fat, and carbs, and you're eating the right ones for your, say, genetic metabolic type, then you would, those 3 things. And so if a person wanted to even just play with the ratios, let's say that you wrote it down, what you had, and half the plate was this or that, and then you felt satisfied, but not enough energy. So there's like weakness or something like that, or you're in a bad mood for no reason. Then play with those ratios. Try moving up the amount of protein and fat, perhaps. Move that up to where that's 60% of the plate, and only 40% the rich carbohydrates, the high density type foods. Nothing out of a bag or box belongs on your plate ever. Not really. We have convenience and things like that, but so up it a bit. Now you might notice 2 hours after that, hey, I feel that satiation. I'm not craving anything. I feel lots of energy, and I have a sense of well-being. And you might have to go to 75%. If you're part Eskimo, maybe 90%, I don't know, protein and fat. But you will find it if you use those 3 things: satiation, energy, and sense of well-being, and you play with the macronutrient ratios. And at some point, you can start to play with, which sources of protein, for instance. I do very well in buffalo for some reason. I love buffalo meat. It just seems to have the right nutrient, high purine type proteins in that. Even organ meats, those are just great for me and my metabolic type. I love the dark fishes too, sardines and these dark kind of fish, the rich sort of fatty fish.
Did you always like those?
Here's the funny thing is, as a kid, I only ate white meat on the turkey, but now I realize that it's the dark meat that satisfies me more, that I'm actually have more energy, more sense of satiation, and a better sense of well-being. The dark meat, you know what it is? They're a little fattier. You grab a drumstick, you can pull it all right off the bone, and it's nice and rich and juicy, and
Yeah.
it's not the dry white meat. So now other people who are slower oxidizers, and this is just in their genes, there's no way to change it really. You can fluctuate a little bit, but they like the white meat, and they do very well in salad. And again, if you gave an Eskimo even the best fruit bowl and nothing but salad, they'd have no energy, no sense of satiation. They'd be pretty upset, and they'd need to go kill something and eat it.
So would you say that your
get
body
satisfied.
kind of knows what it needs, what it wants? Because my son, I'm thinking he's got to be, I don't know, he needs protein and fat, and he goes for the drumstick every time. I mean, that's what he wants, it's like his body knows.
Yes, you get used to the energy, and there's things that maybe even aren't even that good for you in abundance that you just really feel great on, so you could eat them occasionally. But when I was a kid, there was a nursery rhyme: Jack Sprat could eat no fat, his wife could eat no lean. But I didn't know they were talking about metabolic typing, and this idea of fast oxidizer, slow oxidizer, and the other things that go along with it. But if you played with just your macronutrient ratios, you'd be amazed at what happens when you fuel your cells properly. They know what to do, like thyroid cells. You don't have to teach them what their job is. It's programmed in. But you better feed them all right and produce energy at the right rate, quality, and quantity. And you can do that with food. And since we were going to talk about thyroid here, everyone knows that like seaweed has iodine. That's generally good. You need iodine and tyrosine to make thyroid hormone. And so on this show, I think you've gone through that ad nauseum, we know how that works. You need salted or certain nuts that have selenium. Selenium is used in the enzymes that convert T4 to T3 and so on. So there's a lot of sort of science and stuff, but generally if you ate according to your metabolic type, then all your cells would go well, including your thyroid cells. That's been my approach, just sort of the big view. You mentioned 30,000 foot view. Sure. I try to take that broad view of balancing on every problem that a person can have. And set an example.
I love that way of putting it so simply too, because that is hands down one of the biggest questions we get is, how do I know what to eat? And there is no one single thyroid diet. It'd be easier if there was, but there's not. And we're a very non-dogmatic platform. We really try to share options and information with people. But if there is one kind of stance we take as far as nutrition, it's that we're all bio-individual and we have different needs. So I love that way of thinking about your macronutrients and tapping into that, satiety, energy, and sense of well-being, and so much of this journey of living well for all of us, and especially us as thyroid patients, is just that, just tuning into the feedback your body is giving you and learning how to listen to the messages that it's providing you with.
And what's
so much wisdom there.
And kind of ironic to me is that, isn't that what you want anyway, is to be satiated, to have energy, and to have a good sense of well-being? I mean, that seems like it should just kind of be, innate.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, you asked about food. Now, what else? If I have this sort of 5-step epigenetic program. If you talk about the environment, how to fit. Well, there's 5 major areas. Diet is huge. Diet's a big one. Now, rest is important. You have to sleep or you can't be healthy. Exercise is incredibly important. They say sitting is the new smoking. What am I doing right now? Sitting. Although I could raise this desk up.
I'm standing.
So diet, Yeah, you're standing.
I'm
Okay, right
standing.
on. Diet, rest, which is sleep, good sleep, exercise, and then I have my two S's. So DRESS spells dress. It makes it really easy to remember. It might be silly for some people, but DRESS: diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction or management, and supplements. So I highly focus, besides the diet, obviously rest and exercise, but stress reduction and supplementation. And supplementation, I don't have my own brand or label or anything, but I know a lot about supplements. But stress reduction, we have to talk about those food sensitivities because they're incredibly stressful. So you can actually cover both the D and the S, the part of the stress, which is those food sensitivities, by watching what you put in your mouth, and if you get a good food sensitivities test done, um, there's tests that will test for 90 foods. I have one that tests for 170 foods, and of course, no one eats that many foods. Most people don't eat more than 10 different foods, maybe, or 15, but and some less than that. But you can test for the foods. You can find out which ones are causing inflammation or likely to be causing inflammation, and that's another whole discussion. But DRESS, stress reduction, you got to get rid of bugs, parasites, bacteria, funguses, viruses, or at least handle them, and you got to get rid of foods you're sensitive to. So that's a little, we talk about protein, fat, and carbs, and which ones. Well, organic, whole food, nothing out of a bag or box if you can help it, and then but minus your food sensitivities, which are usually that some could be inborn. I mean, there are such a thing as celiacs who can't break down the proteins in a lot of grain, and then there's just food sensitivities that develop. And there's good testing for that. So I'm a huge testing guy.
Yeah, I know food sensitivity testing for me was hugely important in making some big discoveries. Like before I was even diagnosed with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, I had like debilitating stomach pain. And of course, GI issues are some of the most difficult to diagnose. And I went through the whole rigmarole of the, radioactive dye. They did a scope. I mean, they were treating me for GERD. They put me on PPIs for the rest of my life. And I'm like, this just does not feel like it is addressing anything. Nothing has changed. I still have the same symptoms. Now I just have all these medical bills and a prescription that has some pretty serious long-term side effects. And the thing that really solved the mystery for me was when I started my healing journey after being diagnosed with Hashimoto's years later, was food sensitivity testing showed me that I had a serious intolerance to eggs, any kind of eggs. And it was just like, oh, this light bulb, like, how did I not
know this?
Because the symptoms, it wasn't I eat eggs and I'm sick. It's I'm eating more eggs in general and I'm having these attacks of like gastritis or something. And the funny thing is, in the conventional medical world, I actually got into an argument with my son's allergist about this because I asked her, he was having the same kind of symptoms. He had a plate of scrambled eggs and was randomly vomiting for 2 months after that. And I said, would you please consider doing a food sensitivity test on him? Oh, no way. And this is why it's completely medically and scientifically irrelevant foods. And I'm like, I have my own story with this. Was not irrelevant at all. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that? Like, why is there so much resistance to this, to food sensitivity testing?
Sure, be happy to. I had that same discussion, if you will, with, allergists, and they have a certain way of thinking, and they're there for a reason. And they focus mostly on what's called an IgE allergy, so because they're there to save lives. And if you have a severe enough allergy, you could die of anaphylactic shock or something. So, people have been known to eat peanuts or shellfish and their airway closes up and they choke to death, so that's just their way of doing things. And, I'm not a physician. I don't have those sort of handcuffs or what you would probably call blinders on, like only IgE matters. Well, there's lots of other ways your body could respond negatively to a product or anything you influence or it's exposed to. We just call them oral intolerances. So they're not really allergies. You're just orally intolerant. Now that could be because your body doesn't know how to break that food down. In other words, you have like a lactose intolerance is your body doesn't have the enzymes to break down lactose. You don't have the lactase. You're not making it. It's not being produced in the villi and being released. So it's just an oral intolerance. When I eat this food, I get some undesired reaction. So there's lots of those kind of things. And then there's other ways the body could respond negatively too. That's not IgE mediated. In other words, you don't get the immediate eyes watering or sneezing or skin rashes like you might with a dog allergy. If you're allergic to a dog, you'd know about it. And if you're truly allergic to like strawberries, every time you ate them, your eyes, you'd get this histamine response or some kind of immediate response. But there's lots of other responses and ways you could be intolerant of a food that just isn't recognized by allergists. Mm-hmm. And I gave up trying to explain it to them a long time ago. The good news is that doctors are there to save lives, and they do, and they help people with suffering and pain and lots of things they're very good at. But as far as paying attention to underlying causes and conditions and prevention, it's just not in their scope, really. They want to be. That's why they're hiring health coaches now, by the way. And health coaching is taken off like a rocket ship. It's one of the most satisfying, rewarding professions you can have. And anyway, I'm just all for that side of it, the coaching out part. And I think you're asking me about why do doctors not run these tests? I think it's because they're not covered by insurance, and doctors are reticent to recommend something not covered by insurance. And so the next question is, why don't insurance companies pay for them? Because they want to save money and make money for their investors. They don't want to have all these labs being run there. And there's one I run that's even after 25 years is still classified as experimental. They just don't want to pay the bill. From my perspective, there might be some other reasons that I'm not aware of, but when I first ran this one test, and it's gone through iterations, the labs improve and change and refine a little bit. But I started running this lab 20 years ago, and a lady came in, and she was, this is a really good, quick, short story. She was coming in for chiropractic care, and I was walking her back to the treatment room. And I would sometimes do myofascial therapy on their neck and put a heat pack on them. And then the doctor would come in and adjust them, the chiropractor who owned the clinic. And I'm walking her back for her treatment. And I could tell she was feeling sad and blue and down. And I've known her for a couple months now. And I said, what's wrong? Hey, what's wrong? She goes, I'm just depressed. Why? Well, it's this weight, I'm 40 pounds overweight. And it's because of this medication I'm on, that if I don't take the medication, I get the hives really bad. I'm on this medication to get the hives. And I went to my doctor yesterday, and I just told him I'm really sick of being overweight. She's gained 40 pounds since started taking the medication 2 years ago. And my brain's spinning like this, like what the heck? And she says, now I told my doctor I'm depressed and because I'm fat. And he said, look, lady, you can either be fat or you can have the hives. Take your pick. And she goes, that's depressing. And just the day before he had told her, and if you're depressed, I can give you something for your depression.
Oh, of course. I knew that's where you were going with that part, right?
Yeah. So I just looked at her. This is like an absolute true story. I looked at her and I said, well, did you ever try to find out why you get the hives? And her head about snapped off her neck. What? I said, did you ever try to figure out why you get the hives? I mean, you're taking this. And she goes, well, no, how would I do it? Anyway, so I ran, nowadays I don't deal with people that won't run 3 or 4 or 5 labs. But back then I just said, well, take this test kit home and we'll test you and we'll see if we can do anything about the hives or look at underlying causes, conditions, the whole idea. It was a food sensitivity test. And we got the test results and I told her what foods to get off of and which ones to eat. The green list. That's the good news, is you get this great shopping list out of these labs, but this is what you really need to avoid. And it was foods she'd been eating every day. And within 9 days, she was telling me that she was completely off her medication. And she had told her doctor, I'm off this medication, thank you very much. And within another week, she was doing 2 things she hadn't done in 2 years. Because even on the medication, if she worked out to the point of perspiration, she got the hives. And if she took a hot shower, she got that. She had not worked out to the point of perspiration or taking a hot shower in 2 years. And was 40 pounds overweight. So within a couple of weeks of running this one lab, getting off foods, eating the right foods, she was losing weight, taking hot showers, and working out to the point of perspiration. So I knew I was on the right track 20 years ago. Yeah, I got many other stories like that. Just so many incredible stories. Yeah. So if you have a thyroid problem or migraine headaches or asthma or any of these things, where most physicians just want to put you on meds, then you really need to do some serious investigation into the underlying causes and conditions.
Yeah, the root causes. And I think that's one of the best potentials of food sensitivity testing, is just uncovering those hidden healing opportunities.
Yeah, that's exactly what they are.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Reed.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. We could come back if you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we could go on and on. There's so much more to cover in terms of thyroid nutrition. This is such a huge topic, but really helpful the way that you've broken it down into some simple ideas about, like the dress, diet, rest, exercise, stress management, supplements, or the metabolic typing in terms of what's the right equation of macronutrients for your unique body. So really helpful stuff.
Sure.
Exactly. 3 things to ask yourself. Are you satiated? Do you have energy? And do you feel, what's your sense of
well-being? Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to ask my daughter when she gets home after we eat, I'm going to say, we're doing it. We're going to try it. So absolutely. Thank you so much, Reed.
Yeah, beautiful. We also could talk about other labs besides the food sensitivity testing. I think there's now that health coaches can run lab work, they don't diagnose, they don't do medical diagnosis, but they look for those healing opportunities. So there's a whole different way to look at lab work now that doesn't require a license, and that would just give the public, if you want, hey, what's out of balance, what needs fixing, so to speak, and how do I fix it? We can answer those questions for the public now, and it's remarkably, it's exhilarating. It's a phenomenal career, and we can talk about that all you want.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, maybe it would be great to put in the show notes a couple tests that you really recommend in addition to the food sensitivity testing. So are there a couple off the top of your head that you think make your top 3 or top 5 or?
Yeah, sure. Well, because diet's so important, there's a test that doesn't require any blood, saliva, urine, or stool. It's just an online test. It's at mtdiet.com. It's the Metabolic Typing Diet Questionnaire. It's really cool program. And then besides that, run saliva, urine, blood, and stool. So I always look at the hormones, immune system, digestion, detoxification systems. And so with saliva, urine, and some stool testing, you could do all of that, plus look at your parasites, bacteria, funguses, these overgrowths that people with compromised immune systems need to be very, very careful about. And, half the immune system, or 80%, according to some people, is in the gut. And so that's why we end up with leaky gut and autoimmune conditions, and this whole cascade of chaos going on in the body. So there's, again, matter of fact, I like my acronyms, right? So I have the Dress for Health Success protocols, but I have the hidden stressors and dysfunctions. So that would be HIDDEN: hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system balance. That's the autonomic, sympathetic and parasympathetic balance. So HIDDEN is the investigation. We got to look into those pillars of health and imbalances and problems that occur. But you don't have to diagnose anything medically. You just look for the dysfunction and imbalances, as I said, and you heal or repair or restore or function to every cell, tissue, organ, and system. Again, you don't have to teach a cell what its job is. That's an inborn knowledge, information, and you just have to feed the cells right and remove all the interferences. We coach up function, coach down the contributors to metabolic chaos, and people invariably get better. And that system I found in 20 years, guys, Jenny and Dana, it works better than specific treatment programs being offered by other practitioners. So in other words, if you go into a person who says, I specialize in thyroid, they'll work on your thyroid. But if you come to me or someone I've trained through my training program, we'd work on every cell, tissue, organ. We almost ignore the fact that you said it was thyroid. I mean, we know about it. We know what the labs look like, and we know, specific foods, maybe some supplements and things to encourage. And again, we want to coach up function, and it's okay to give some attention to weak areas, but it's really the whole body that and with this truly amazing epigenetic program, the Dress for Health Success program, you are working on every cell, tissue, organ, and system simultaneously. So I think that's the answer.
Yeah. Well, I would cheers to you on that.
Yes.
I absolutely agree wholeheartedly, and that's certainly held true. Yeah. We'll clink our teacups.
Clink.
But that's definitely held true. And thank you so much for your perspectives on this and for the important work that you're doing in this community to help people optimize their health and on a systemic level, to look at the whys and the root causes, and not just address a thyroid issue, for example, but your whole life and health and epigenetics and all of those things come into play in this system that we're all a part of.
And we're huge fans. I don't think Catherine is practicing too much, but Catherine Watkins, I know, is a functional diagnostic nutritionist. I know she had, I guess, gone through your program before, and she's one of our experts at Thyroid Refresh. And she just, goes on and on about all the different, ways and things, and loves you. So just wanted to throw that in there for you. So we're big fans.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. We'll say hello. Well, I'll stay in touch. And if I can come back and help you again, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you. For our listeners, you can find Reed Davis at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of Thyroid Refresh TV, where we give you the inspiration and information you need to live thyroid healthy. To receive your free Thyroid Thrivers grocery guide, you can visit us at thyroidrefresh.com. And to learn more about Thyroid 30, our revolutionary 30-day wellness app, you can go to thyroidrefresh.com/thyroid30. You do have the power to heal, and we have the tools.
And if you enjoyed this podcast and would like to help us continue inspiring and empowering thyroid patients worldwide, please leave us an iTunes review. It would make our day. You are what makes this community the amazing resource that it is. And we so appreciate your listenership and your support. We're Dana and Jenny, wishing you the best of health. See you next time. Thanks, guys.
See you next time.
Bye.